Yes, you. Welcome to the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast, a podcast for people who want to disrupt their lives for a good reason, to make it count. I'm your host, Jen Glantz, and every week I'll drop a new episode with stories from real people just like you, who woke up one morning and decided to make big changes, starting with small things. We'll cover topics like entrepreneurship, love, failure, and self-care. Hey, you're not getting any younger, so let's make this an adventure. Ready? This week's episode is brought to you by the First 90 Days Coaching Program. For 3 months, the first 3 months of the new year, let's work together on getting you a strategy, getting you realistic goals, getting you started on that thing you know you should have started a while ago, getting you going on that life change with steps that you can actually accomplish week by week, all in the form of coaching, accountability, email support, on-demand workshops to consume and dive into. Let me be there to coach you and help you out with your first 90 days of the year. I'd love for you to learn more at jenglantz.com/first90. That's jenglantz.com/first90. You'll find some good things there. I can't wait for you to check it out. Hey, any youngers, it's me, your host, Jen Glantz, back with another episode of the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast. Happy freaking New Year, my dear friends. It's January 1st, 2021, and I am no psychic. I cannot predict the future. I don't know if this year's gonna be good, bad, happy, sad, but I sure do hope. I sure do pray that this year is a whole lot better for you than it was last year. Look, 2020 will go down as a year that when we try to explain it to people, it'll be a mouthful. I hope that 2021 has a different meaning for you. I'm not one for New Year's resolutions. I'm not one to sit down and make these gigantic plans and promises that are going to linger and last for the whole year, only to look at them in July and realize I've done none of them and feel really bad about myself. Last year in 2020, at the start of 2020 in January, was one of the first years of my entire life that I tried to plan ahead. And I did this because a good friend of mine encouraged people to email her our New Year's resolutions for the year. And when she put that call out, I thought, you know what? This will be the year that I plan something. So what did I do? I emailed her these resolutions that I looked back on last week and realized I did none of them. None of them. And yeah, some of them were because of the pandemic, but also some of them were just because I grew out of those goals, or I pivoted, or I changed, or those weren't the goals that were really going to carry me through the year. So I realized that making New Year's resolutions is creating this faulty strategy for yourself that doesn't really get you very far, because your resolutions, it's really hard to plan 365 days out. So a big thing I'm doing this year is splitting my year up into 90-day chunks. And I'm setting goals for each of those 90-day chunks for each month. And I'm going to explain this whole plan to you later on in this episode, hopefully to encourage you to approach this new year with ease and with deep breaths and with some clarity. I know that when a new year springs upon us, we rush to some sort of finish line. We almost exert all of our energy at the start. And the problem with that is that we get to March or we get to April and we feel burned out. And I don't know about you, but 2020 felt like it was 10 years in 1 year. And a lot of us are still burnt out from just getting through that year. So in this episode, I'm going to walk you through some of my plans for these 90-day chunks, how I'm laying everything out, the supplies I went and bought at the dollar store to help me out, and how you can take a similar approach if you think that it interests you as well. I hope that you had a good end of your year since we last talked, aka since the last podcast you listened to. I hope you took some time to rest and relax and stuff your face silly with all of your favorite treats. I tried to plan December as a month to disrupt my whole life, to look at every piece of it, take inventory on it, and plan how to change and pivot and just grow as a human being. And I always hope that by doing that I'll finish that exploratory process by mid-December and take the rest of the month off. But what I start to do is when I unravel all of these different areas of my life, I see the problems get deeper and deeper and deeper. And to unknot them, to unravel them, it just takes more time. I had all these plans that by the end of the year, I would do some really nice things for myself. I wanted to go ice skating. I love, love, love ice skating. I wanted to get a facial. My skin has been so bad. I've always had acne, but of course wearing masks all the time just makes my skin even worse. And I didn't do any of that by the end of the year. And why I'm telling you that is for those of you who you tried really hard to rest and relax at the end of the year, but you just found yourself working and maybe having anxiety about things, you're not alone. I also did something which was really powerful is I didn't use social media for the past 2 weeks. Sure, I went on occasionally to check messages and to like a few posts, but I didn't post anything other than, oh, happy birthday to my dog Goofy, because her birthday was December 26th, but I didn't post anything else. I also didn't spend more than 15 minutes a day on social media, and doing all of that allowed me to at least turn that part of my brain off toward the end of the year, and that was super powerful because going through the holiday season, you find yourself comparing and contrasting constantly, and if you can do one thing to rest and relax because you can't do anything else, it's turning off social media. So that was a game changer for me. That was an awesome way to end the year. But what I did for the final 2 weeks of the year was almost every day after I woke up, I took Goofy for a walk, is I packed up my computer, I packed up my stacks of notebooks, and I went downstairs. I live in an apartment building, which downstairs they have a common area with couches and things like that nobody ever uses. I live in a building in Brooklyn where most people aren't really here right now. They abandoned Brooklyn, they went somewhere else for the holidays, so the building's empty, and that common space is never used. So I turned that common space into a safe space for me to do work. And why it was epic was because there's no internet there. The internet's broken. So I would go there every day from about 8 to 11:30, and I would just do non-internet work, which included planning and revamping and thinking of how to really switch things up in 2020 for all of my different projects, for everything that I do. And it was so powerful being in a new space, a change of scenery, but also not having internet to distract me. And during those times, I created all my 90-day goals, but also found some really cool ways to just shake up some of my projects. And I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the cool changes that I'm going to have for this podcast this year. Believe it or not, this will be the 3rd year of the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast, and we're going to hit 200 episodes by the end of the year. But I wanted to switch it up. When I first started the podcast, every single week I had a guest on, and that was awesome. It was really cool getting to interview incredible people. Year 2, I switched it up a little bit, and I did every other week I had a guest, and every other week I did a solo episode, just so that I can give you a little bit more of my perspective, my advice. But this year, I'm doing something a little bit crazy, a little bit cool, and a little bit different. Every week in the month is a new kind of episode. So 1 week of the month will be just like this. You and I solo, me to you, you to me, and that's it. Another week of the month will be me interviewing a guest. And this is a guest that I will carefully select. Since there's not going to be many guests this year, just once a month, I'm going to pick the ultimate, the top, the greatest guest that will bring you the greatest value. Now, the other 2 episodes a month are going to be super out there and revolutionary. Get this. I'm introducing a new series, which is inspired by a podcast episode I did last month with a friend of mine named Molly Beck, where every single month I bring on a friend. And when I bring the friend on the show, I do not tell them what I'm going to interview them about. I only tell them that I'm going to interview them about something that I think they're an expert at, that many other people aren't an expert at. That's all they know when they come on the show. And then when they're on the show, I ask them to guess what the topic is, and eventually I interview them about that topic. So you get this raw, authentic person on the show with no idea what they're going to talk about, who is now ask to give their uncanny but brilliant advice about that thing they're an expert at. So this is a series. It's going to happen once a month as well, where I bring on this friend. And so far, all the friends I've asked have been grateful enough to do this for me, and I appreciate them fully, but also super nervous, a little uncomfortable, and not thrilled about it, but they do it anyway. And it ends up being really fun and funky and fresh. And I'm doing that because I know so many incredible people in my personal life that I think could bring you guys so much value. So that's why I'm having one per month come on the show, and they're going to talk about something that I personally think they're an expert at. And next week will be the first one of 2021. I'm bringing on my old boss, who I am talking to him about a topic that I think a lot of people strive to be great at, but they don't understand how. And my old boss, Josh Clark, breaks that down for you. Now, the fourth and final type of episode every single month is part of this larger project I'm starting called the Pick Me Up series. If you are on my Monday email newsletters, you saw that it is changed to be called the Pick Me Up. That is a new theme in my personal brand, is this Pick Me Up series, and it's entering this podcast because one time per month, what I'm going to do is have you tell me what you want help with. So I have this voicemail app. It's called SpeakPipe. And if you go to speakpipe.com/JenGlantz, speakpipe.com/JenGlantz, you could leave me a short voicemail that gives me a challenge you have, a topic you have, a question you have that you need advice on, that you need to pick me up on. I will take that voicemail and I will answer those questions once a month on the Pick Me Up episode. And there's more to come around this Pick Me Up series, but that's the fourth episode. So if you're following along, I know that's a lot, but here's the 4 types of episodes that you're going to get in this podcast. Number 1 is a solo episode. Number 2 is an interview style episode with a guest. Number 3 is a friend episode where I invite the friend on, but don't tell them what they're going to talk about. And number 4 is that Pick Me Up show where you let me know what you need advice on, what you need to pick me up on, and I will be there to pick you up. So those are some changes with the show, and I'm doing that to sort of spice up the episodes every month, make them different, make them valuable, make them unique, and just incredible for you as we enter together this 3rd year of podcasting with the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast. Also reminding you to come hang out with us in the Facebook group, You're Not Getting Any Younger Facebook group. There's over 1,500 people in there. The group is having tons of changes as well in terms of the different types of things people are posting and the questions and the advice. It's a great place to go just to have community, especially during such an isolating time as this time is. When you're listening to the show, if you like it, as always, scroll down, leave us a review, but feel free to share it on social media, share it with a friend. If you share it on social, tag us at Any Younger, at Jen Glantz. We will repost everything that you put out there. Your support means so much to me. Get ready for some new changes, some new awesome things happening in 2021. This podcast is alive and well, my dear friends, and I cannot wait to keep it keeping on for all of you. Let me know how you feel about these changes. Send me a DM on Instagram at Jen Glantz or an email, jenglantz@gmail.com. All right, so let's talk about this whole breaking up your year into 90-day chunks. This idea came to me at the end of 2020 after a few different things happened. The first was a couple of different coaching calls I had with clients who wanted to map out and plan out their 2021. But what I found was that it was really hard to figure out where they're going to end up in December if we don't even know what the starting line looks like at the start of the year. So a lot of the coaching calls went from let's just do high-level planning to let's plan out a solid first 90 days where you actually know what you're doing, what your strategy looks like, what goals you're achieving every month. That way, toward the end of the month, you can reassess, you can optimize, you can pivot, so that by the end of the first 90 days, you have something to show for yourself. I find that a lot of people enter a new year with this energy, these goals, this aspiration, but they don't even know where to start. So I figured looking internally, looking at my own life, my own projects, all of these things that I have in motion and all of these things that I want to put in motion, what does the first 90 days look like for all of these things? The other thing that happened was toward the end of 2020, a group of my friends and I got on a Zoom call, and I have this group of three friends, and we get together all the time. We used to all live in New York City, so back in the day, in the early 2010-ish era, we would get together, we'd have pizza, and we were all in a similar kind of industry. We were all doing something creative. We just got along really well. And since that time, a lot of us have moved all over the place. One of them is in Florida, the other's in Chicago. So we do these Zoom calls now where we get together, we brainstorm, we chat, we're there for each other. It's an awesome friend group of mine that I feel so entirely grateful for. And we were talking at the end of 2020, and one of the girls brought up the fact that she likes to choose a word that defines the next year. So an intentional word that just sort of guides how the next year is going to be, a word of the year of sorts. And I loved this idea. I took to this idea because I thought it was powerful. And I've done something like that in the past, though after the first 2 weeks of January, I had completely abandoned the word. I had forgotten about the word. So we were all brainstorming our words, and we were keeping each other accountable with emails, talking through what our words are. And I thought, I can't pick a word for 2021 because I have no idea what's going to happen during the year. I can pick a word for the first 90 days. So I began thinking of 2021 like that, in these chunks. And by the way, my word for 2021, the first 90 days, is the word control. I am desperately working to just get control over everything I have in motion, because when you do so many different things like I often do, sometimes you lose control of some parts of that while you're working on other parts. You know, for example, I have Bridesmaid for Hire. I have the book and the polling series for my wedding, Finally the Bride. I have this podcast. I run the Facebook group for this podcast. I have my Jen and Juice coaching where I work with such incredible people every month. I have so many courses on my website. I just have a lot of different things that I do. So when I'm working really hard on a couple of those things, I lose focus of the other parts of these other things. And before I know it, a year has passed and there's been no innovation with some of these things. So what I decided to do was take all of my projects, everything I care about, plus everything I want to launch in the next year, and I mapped it out with my goals for the first 90 days. So I set these high-level goals for each of these different projects of mine, and you can do the same. So let's say, you want to change careers, or you want to start dating again, or you want to get healthy. Rather than having these big goals for the whole year, have them for the first 90 days. So you have these high-level goals for the first 90 days. And then what I did was I took all of the different things that I have to do to reach those goals by the end of March. I wrote down every single one of those tasks, and I split it up into what I'm going to do January, then what makes sense to do February, and then what makes sense to do in March. So when I had those goals for each month, it now allows me to view the month in these baby steps, this checklist that I can continue to check off to make it to the next month. And I did this in a couple of different ways. I went to the dollar store and I bought those gigantic wall calendars, and I started to write on the wall calendar all of the goals for that month. Then I went even more meta and I wrote down the days of the month and what I wanted to do by that day. So let's say in January, I have three big things I want to do for Bridesmaid for Hire in just January. Okay, well, thing 1, I'm going to get done by the 11th. Thing 2, I'm going to get done by the 18th. Thing 3, I'm going to get done by the 22nd. That way I have these goals actually having a deadline within that month. So I wall calendared all these goals. The other thing I bought at the dollar store, which was clutch, were these poster boards. And as you can tell, I'm a very paper pen kind of person. I'm not like a digital app kind of person. I like to write things down and stare at it. So I put up all these poster boards. I duct taped these poster boards to my wall. And what I did was I have one big one for December, and that was all my end of December goals. And I have another one for January with all my goals for January. And it's like an ultimate to-do list that I have close to me. So if I have some downtime or I'm not sure what to work on and on a Saturday, I could look at that list and cross things off as I go. But it holds me accountable by being there in front of my face. So that's sort of how I was able to plan out, to map out my first 90 days by choosing high-level goals, by then strategically choosing January, February, March goals to make sure that I get those things done so that when the end of March happens, I can say, oh my God, I did something, I accomplished something, and I don't have to wait until the end of 2021 to do that. So after the end of that first 90 days, I'm going to reassess, reevaluate, and plan for the second 90 days, but we'll get there eventually. The other thing I did was I created check-in points because, again, life gets crazy and I really want to make sure that by the end of March, I've achieved these goals. So I already put some time on the calendar to check in with myself to see, okay, we are in mid-January. How are things working? How are things looking? And I think I mentioned this before, but I live and breathe by the things on my calendar. So if I have a 2-hour time block on January 15th to check in, I'm not going to miss that and I'm going to reassess these goals. So I already scheduled time to check in, to hold myself accountable, to make sure things are going. Now, the cool thing about splitting it up into 3 separate to-do lists for 3 different months is that at the end of January, I can see, okay, I actually did not a lot of these goals, but maybe I can push some to February. Or you can say, okay, I actually did all of these goals and I started on February's goals, and you can check those off as well. So you're able to sort of see yourself move and groove through these timelines. I also themed the first 3 months of 2021, which go along with the themes of the podcast for the first 3 months of 2021. For January, I themed it Find. And January's main goal is to really start to put things in motion to find what sticks, to find what I like, to find what feels good. February's theme of the month is Feel, to start to put things in motion to see how it feels, how it works, how my audience perceives it. And then March, because it's the last chunk of the first 90 days, the theme is Focus, to really focus in and put the time in to make sure I am getting those things done so that my big goals for the first 90 days are achieved. So here's what I would say for you. If you're entering this year overwhelmed, you're entering this year energized, you're entering this year exhausted, whatever you're entering this year feeling like, is don't view it as a 365-day year. View it as 90 days and set yourself up to succeed in these first 90 days. So theme your months, theme them whatever you want, and have them be aligned with those big picture goals for the first 90 days. Then break down those goals into every single step so that month by month you can get working on them. So for example, I wanted to start to update my Finally the Bride book series and polls. So what I have here is a list of all the things I'm going to do for that project in January. And it's such small tasks. Like sometimes I can check off 10 of these tasks an hour. That's how small I'm making these tasks so that when I go to approach these tasks, it's not one gigantic thing like build a website or publish a book. It's like, okay, today, research this, make a list of this, pick this, brainstorm this. That way, when you go to approach these goals on a daily basis throughout the 90 days, you can achieve them. So I challenge you to think about your first 90 days. What do you want to accomplish by the end of March? And how are you going to make that happen between now and then? Set yourself up to feel good. Show up for yourself in a way that's not so overwhelming, that doesn't burn you out, that doesn't make you wake up in July, whether or not this year is what it's going to be, and feel bad about yourself. Look, we learned last year that there's only so much we can control. There's so much that's out of our control. But one of the things we can have control over is how we use our time, how we split up our life so that we can accomplish things more often and not just assess what we did and didn't do because the countdown clock of the year is telling us to. I feel like I'm creating these mini New Years within a year. And look, I've never done anything like this before, but I got to tell you, the thought of this, the process of doing this, already starting on this, has made this new year feel different, feel attainable, feel exciting for the first time in a very, very long time. I mentioned earlier that I do a lot of coaching and I started a first 90-day coaching program. So work with people like you to help you with this for the first 90 days. So if you're interested in learning more, I have a link in the notes below where you can learn more about that first 90 days coaching program, or you could head to my website, jenglantz.com, and check it out. Either way, if you're listening to this on the first day of the new year or any day of the new year, it is never, ever, ever too late to put a plan in motion that's on a lower scale, but can also help you achieve larger goals. So take those New Year's resolutions if you've already made them and start to figure out what a mini version of accomplishment looks like after doing something for the first 90 days. As you sit here and as we together march forward into a brand new year, I just want to say, my dear friend, podcast listener, I have your back. I'll be here with you throughout the rest of 2021, dishing you some awesome episodes in some really cool new forms. And I just want to thank you for listening to this podcast and for being there for me as I experiment with these things throughout the year. I appreciate you. And if no one has told you this in a while, you've got this. This year is what you make of it, and you will make something of it. You will. I believe in you. Now, next month, in July, in August, you get the hint, my friend. Until next time, all my love, Jen Glantz. Hey you! Thank you for listening to the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast. There are hundreds of thousands of pods out there, so thank you for listening to this one. You can find the show notes for this week's episode up on our website, anyyounger.com. Subscribe, rate, and review the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast on iTunes so that other ears around the world can listen too. Oh, and join our secret You're Not Getting Any Younger Facebook group, where over 1,000 people are talking about how to disrupt their lives, for a good reason, to make it count. Until next week, all my love, Jen Glantz.